esta transmisión especial de la sexta plataforma regional para la reducción del riesgo de desastres en las Américas. En este momento damos paso a la paralela número 6 de esta plataforma regional. Aquí podremos conocer todo lo relacionado sobre el control de inundaciones y los nuevos modelos desarrollados a través de la Agencia de Cooperación Internacional JICA y el IDEAN de Colombia. Continúen entonces siguiéndonos a través de vía streaming en la sexta plataforma regional de reducción del riesgo de desastres de las Américas.
This is why in this session we want frankly to voice exactly what's going on, what are the critical points that make it difficult for us to make progress in flooding management. Aside from the triumphant speech that everything's working well, everything's working right, we need to elaborate on the problems that we have and that we need to face. So the format of this session is going to be somewhat different to others. In first place, we're going to have a session, a keynote speech. After that, we're going to invite our panel members so to see from different standpoints two moments. One, in order to diagnose those things that are still issues to be solved, and a second round for our panelists to recommend best practices, solutions, and recommendations. And at the end, we'll have a forum and we will answer to some of the questions in the auditorium and draw final conclusions. Without more time to lose, our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Hitoshi Baba, whom is an expert. He is a main advisor of JICA around flooding affairs and has broad experience in Latin America of more than 30 years working in different approaches for the control and the comprehensive management of floodings. We'd like to invite Dr. Hitoshi Baba to brief his.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to say thanks to the organizer of this important meeting of the sixth regional platform here in Cartagena, beautiful town. And I should also say thanks to the coordinator of this session, particular session, inviting me to speak about the Japanese experience in many countries about the flood risk management. Well, I know weaknesses in the nations of the Americas. I have been studying about some flood disasters. For example, in Colombia, in 2010 to 2011, you had a big flood in the Rio Magdalena. I have made survey of the affected areas in many places, and I found some weaknesses. For example, an unclear responsibilities of river administration, less integrated river and flood management. Not only in Colombia, but in many countries of the America, I studied about this kind of weaknesses compared to Japan. I will explain about how Japan developed the flood risk management system as a system. Actually, after the study about the big flood in 2010 to 2011 in Rio Magdalena, I made a recommendation to the government of Colombia, and today the government developed very big progress, made a big progress. However, the capacities, how is the capacities? Yes, you know, they have a very big, very good capacity of the response. Response concentrated flood management is very good, but lacking capacities in the flood risk assessment and flood prevention measures particularly. in order to make more resilient society, not after the flood, but in prior to the occurrence of flood disaster. For example, you know, this kind of pictures showing the good practices in the response activities, such as humanitarian activities and dredging, drainage, and also the rehabilitation works of the break of the embankment and so on. How about the system of the river? I think in those countries, river is mainly estimated as a natural space of water, environmental protection area, and the flood disaster risk is not well considered in the development plans nor actions by different sectors. The legal fundamentals, how is the situation for river and flood management? Recently, some governments established the legal fundamentals, including laws and regulations and guidelines. In Colombia, you know, the river conservation of water resources and river was legislated in 1974. And in 1988, the SNPAD was established, the disaster response system. And 2001, by the lay number 48, the environmental management plan was established, and so on. I will lately explain about the Japanese legal fundamentals developed more and more longer time period, long history. Yes, Japan is different from other countries, and already in the 4th century, the Yamato regime, which is the origin of Japan, developed the Kawachi Plan by applying the river engineering. Already in 4th century, very long history we have. In AD 323, the Manda embankment was constructed in order to protect the flood, protect the people from flood. And according to the old rule of the regime enforced in the AD 757, the method of checking the status of the embankment, method of repairment, method of restoration, such kind of engineering method was developed already in the 8th century. Such kind of knowledge from Japan should be applied, and common understanding of integrated flood management is developed in as a national regime, government regime. And we have many technology, science, and legal fundamentals, and societal capacity. In the 16th century, the Takeda Shingen, who is a prominent feudal lord during the Sengoku period, the war period, built the embankment called the Shingen Zutsumi, where the two rivers are joining into one river in a city. And it took about 20 years, long time, 20 years. It is a very good fundamental for the development of a city. And another example I will show, and 15th century, the Tone River crossed the Kanto Plain where the Tokyo is located, the capital area. The Tone River was flowing down to the Tokyo Bay at that time. But taking 60 years for the construction, the river was channeled into the Pacific Ocean directly. by the government at that time. 60 years, very big strategic investment for developing the Tokyo area. We are now living in the area developed by that century's government. After the big flood in 1910, again the strategy was changed from the flood control allowing in the inundation to the sequestration levees confinement. Now many people, more than 4 million, live in such area. And without this kind of investment, we cannot live, we cannot develop Tokyo. Actually, I live in this area. Yeah, minus 0.8 meter under the sea level. Yes. As a result, yeah, we have significantly reduced the number of flood-caused deaths and the area of inundation, as the chart shows. This is clearly shows how the investment is necessary. Well, legal basis. The Japanese river law. River law is very important. And as I said already, in the 8th century, the Ritsuryo, which is the legal codes of the Nara and Heian period, stipulates the flood control as national work. In the 15th to 16th century, the flood management by prefecture warlords ordinance. And 17th to 19th century, flood control works were invested by the feudal government ordinance. And 1896, first river law was established by the Meiji government. And in 1964, the river law includes the water resource management component. And again, the third major amendment was made in 1997, including the environmental conservation function. Finally, we have a very important law of river, including the 3 parts of flood control, water use, and environmental protection. This is the history of Japan's river management. And in this river law, if we quickly mention about integrated flood management relating part, some important points are clearly mentioned. For example, provisions of river and river management facilities, designation of the first-class river and second-class river area, administrator, provision of river construction, structural standards, river management facilities, operation rules, formulation of river improvement basic policy and improvement plan, and emergency measures at flood. The restrictions such as excavation of land and gravels and so on. Adjustment of irrigation, operation of dams and wells and facilities. The provisions of the water extraction. Such kind of components are included in the integrated flood management relating part of the river law. Well, what is integrated flood management, IFM? Should be realized under the good governance. Good governance is transparent, inclusive, collective, and efficient management of the risk. And integrated flood management requires the clear and objective policies with legal frameworks, regulations, and technical guidelines. Management system based on the river basin approach, not based on the territorial approach. It should be managed by river basin management, river basin approach. And also it requires the institutional structure of river administration. Yes, we need a strong administration, strong authority of river management. The community participated actions is also needed. Multidisciplinary approach, participating from different agents, different sectors. Adaptive management, yes, to changing situation, including the climate change. The information management, all the river information should be open for the public and everyone, academy. And appropriate economic instrument, yes, we need fund. Well, strategy. As I said, the long-term strategy is necessary to make our robust and resilient society. Long-term strategy, not the short-term or countermeasures, but long-term strategy is necessary. Disaster risk reduction should be the center of the strategy, and strong authority, as I said, again, authority of river basin management, not by the territorial administration, but strong authority of river, including the flood prevention, mitigation, disaster preparedness, and water resource management, and environment and conservation. All should be integrated into one management administrated by the strong authority. Yes, Japan has this kind of structure. Well, investment. DRR integration into sustainable development by investment. DRR is not the cost, but the investment to secure development of outcomes against disaster. Build back better, as the Sendai framework clearly mentions. Build back better is the use of the recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction phases after the disaster to increase the resilience of the nations and the communities through integrating disaster risk reduction measures into the restoration of the physical infrastructure, social systems, and the economy. Well, mainstream is also very important and the keyword of DRR. Well, I will skip some slides because I need to squeeze my presentation time. If we have time later, I will explain more examples. Yes, localization, local strategy, not only by the national level, but subnational and local levels strategy and actions is necessary, as the Sendai framework is targeting the localized strategy to be achieved by 2020, another 2 years. All the local governments should have the strategy and investment for the DRR, including the flood risk management. And what's next? The regional, local, national, regional. Regional cooperation and coordination to share the knowledge about the flood risk management, to share the information, particularly the satellite information should be shared through this regional cooperation. Satellite information including the meteorological observation, geological survey, and the digital elevation models, such kind is quite difficult for a single country to obtain, but through the regional cooperation, it can be shared. And today we have the cyberspace cooperation, cyberspace, the remote operation of disaster response, crisis mapping, OpenStreetMap, crowdfunding. Such kind of cyberspace cooperation is also quite new but very useful. For example, when I was working in Colombia 2 years ago, the Kumamoto earthquake happened in Japan. And I managed the mapping of Kumamoto earthquake area in Colombia. This is a very good example of cyberspace cooperation. You can do such as cyberspace cooperation. OpenStreetMap Colombia has, this kind of community is an example of cyberspace cooperation. And next is global cooperation, international cooperation and global partnership. Sendai framework describes like this: coordinated, sustained, and adequate international support is necessary. The bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperative arrangements is necessary. Thematic platforms of cooperation, incorporated disaster risk reduction measures into development assistance program. Yes, JICA is very, very responsible for this kind of global cooperation. However, in total, the international disaster finance spent for the response side, not many in the risk reduction side, as you know. Only 10% or 12% is invested for the disaster risk reduction. Most of the part is spent for the response. Yes. 87% of the international disaster finance is spent for the response, recovery, reconstruction. But JICA is different from other donor countries. JICA is investing for risk reduction, mainly risk reduction part, as this red color chart shows, compared to the other. Yes, we are also conducting many projects in, for example, risk identification, warning, preparedness, response, knowledge and education, ensuring priority of DRL. But compared to those actions, mostly the JICA investing the risk reduction projects differently from other donor countries. And the finance, Japan has been the top donor of the direct support of disaster risk reduction in the past 20 years. Because we need fund for the risk reduction projects. Well, evidences. I will explain some examples of JICA's cooperation in Latin American nations. In Peru, research projects on earthquake resilient buildings. In Caribbean nations, the Caribbean Disaster Management Project Phase 1 and Phase 2 were conducted. Project on capacity development for disaster risk management in Central America, both sides, is famous. And in Haiti, the reconstruction program. In Bolivia, the protection of the shoulders of national road. Yes, this is the road construction project. As I said, mainstreaming is very important. Mainstreaming in infrastructure project, mainstreaming in, for example, education sector, mainstreaming DRR in hospitals and so on. Many different sectors. We are investing the DRR. And Honduras, landslide protection project, and Jamaica, emergency communication system, and so on. Some examples of JICA's actions. Okay, I will finish. Colombia, the project for strengthening flood risk management capacity is ongoing, still going. Conclusions. We need to aware the weaknesses in the flood risk reduction of Latin America, such as unclear responsibility of river administration, less integrated flood management. We need to develop capacity of flood risk management in order to invest flood prevention in prior to the occurrence. We need to learn from Japan's long-term efforts of the flood risk reduction investment for future resilient society and the community. Continuous actions, we still developing the system. Establish integrated flood management with good governance. Long-term strategy, as I said. Strong authority. DRR investment for all phases of risk management. And mainstreaming DRR. Local, regional, global actions. And we have many evidences for your reference. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Okay, many thanks. And now we're going to continue with the session. And we'd like to invite our guest panelists up to stage so you can do your presentation. So we'd like to invite you all. Please take your spots. When designing this session, when designing the panel, we strove to identify experts that can provide to this session their standpoints from different fields, from different angles, so that we can have a comprehensive vision in terms of flood management.
Muchas gracias.
Many thanks, and we believe that what is best is that our panelists introduce themselves and share the perspectives in the questions and answers that we're going to have. We'll start with Victor from left to right. Great. Good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Victor Lopez Sevilla, I am the chair of the National Federation of Bodies of People with Disabilities in Honduras. My participation here obeys to the fact that we need to have inclusion of people with disabilities in all of these processes. Good afternoon. My name is Yuri from Brazil. I am an engineer specialist in infrastructure of the Ministry of the Federal Government, and I was the director of urban planning and risk management of the ministry, and today I'm the liaison of the Fund for Research and Technology of the Ministry of Science and Technology from Brazil. Good afternoon to all. My name is Berta Lizomedo. I am the Executive Secretary of the Regional Committee of Water Resources. It's a technical secretariat of the Central American Integration System, SICA, and the members, our board of directors, I'd like to say so right now, are the meteorological, hydrological services and the water institutions of Central America. We're going to be looking into the matter of the regional policies and I am going to allow myself to explain some of the advancements made in the region for the model of this management system. Good afternoon to all, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the organization of the event, and I want to congratulate you. My name is Maria Eva Consavitis. I'm a civil engineer, specialist in hydraulics. I am the secretary in the Department of Hydraulics of the University of Buenos Aires in the Republic of Argentina. I am also a teacher and a researcher. I liaise the class of community engineering of University of Buenos Aires and the area of research developing infrastructure in vulnerable areas. I work with social movements, organizations, community organizations, and overall the citizenry, and I'm going to try to address the issue of the floodings from the standpoint of the communities. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for the invitation. My name is Omar Vargas. I am the Deputy Director of Hydrology of the IDEAM, that is the Hydrology, Meteorology and Environmental Studies Institute of Colombia, IDEAM. I'm a geologist specialized on water resource. I have been at the entity for 20 years, and of course, the approach that pertains to me has to do with the role of the information and knowledge of monitoring for the risk management seen from the perspective of a national institution such as IDEAM is, that is responsible for all of the environmental information and knowledge of Colombia, amongst other duties that are assigned by the Colombian state.
Good afternoon again. I'm Hitoshi Baba, Senior Advisor of JICA. My background is a hydrologist and disaster risk management. At the same time, I am a swift water rescue instructor. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a nuestros panelistas. Vamos a tener, la mecánica va a ser la siguiente. Vamos a proceder a...
Is going to be as follows. I'm going to ask the first question that is going to be answered in the same order that they've introduced themselves. Each panel member will have 4 minutes. You will have the clock to show you how much time you have left. Please provide us clear messages. And the first question that I have is, what are the factors that do not allow to reduce impact of the floodings in a great deal of the countries of Latin America? Let's go ahead and start with Victor.
Muy bien.
We have thought about this issue, and one important thing here is attitude. And we have found that one of the problems for these to develop is attitude on the one hand. On the other hand is participation. And some other factors included there, such as the education and training process, awareness, and permanent awareness campaigns towards all these activities and process regarding risk reduction of disasters. I think this is one of the most important factors, among others, such as economics, policies, and other issues that have to be considered. But I think that human resources, the human part, has to be there for these processes. Thank you. Judy, please. Yes. I think that a historic characteristic for the education of the cities is common in the different countries in Latin America. For instance, in Brazil, 70 years ago, we had a population of 50% in the rural areas. 50% of the population was there. Today, we have around 85% of urban population. So the growth of the cities was very fast. and the investments for infrastructure didn't keep up with this growth. So we have very high urban deficits. There are no programs especially for poor population, especially when they come into the cities. They end up occupying the environmentally sensitive areas. So we have two problems. The existing situation, which is chaos, and how to think towards the future in order to avoid the repetition of these problems. And this is why we have to think about strategies and policies that could face those problems. For example, the real estate pressure, the disorganized occupation of the land, the lack of technical structure in the three levels of government: central, provincial, and municipal governments. The turnaround of the technicians in these three levels, the rotation of technicians in these levels, and it is a characteristic of our countries. The low availability of budget for the investment in risk management. So we have a set of factors that we have to face, which are challenges for all the governments, especially for the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much, Yuri. Berto, please. Good afternoon. With regards to regional policies, I would like to tell you that the Central America integration system has two very important policies. One of them is, I think this is very close. Okay. One of them is the Central America policy for the risk management, where we have other secretariats of the integrated system that are related or that supporting activities for the implementation of this policy, and which is already harmonized with the Sendai framework. Another policy is the regional climate change strategy that is right now in an update, and that also include the other secretariats of the integration Latin America system that has measures or actions within the strategic lines of these two policies. I would like to highlight in these two policies the facts that both are pointing at the land planning issue, which we all know is very important. Land planning is important for the reduction of drought risk, such as the presenter just mentioned. All the issue of infrastructure and land planning they had to do in Japan to reduce the risk of flooding. So within all these secretariats of the SICA, I highlight as an important point the issue of land planning, land use planning. I would like to also tell you that the World Meteorology Organization, to which this hydraulic resources committee belong to, has some certain mandates, including the application of a meteorological application to the different sectors of the economy. So we see that in this mandate of a meteorological organization, there is an interrelation with the regional policies, because they mandate the hydrological and meteorological services that, or to within their low budgets to do integration and generate products for the different sectors of the economy. Regarding floods, the World Meteorological Organization has promoted a mechanism in order to monitor the floods from the monitoring point of view through satellite imagery, and I will tell you more about it later. Thank you very much. Well, in our country, the failure of public policies to reduce the impact of floods is shown on the one hand in the more than $1,500 million of losses in the agricultural sector last year due to the very strong flooding in the center of our country, the 89 fatalities in the flooding in 2013 in Ciudad de la Plata, the declaration of hydric emergency in the 23 Argentinian provinces. So we have some news going around which show this, what I'm telling you. I think that we failed in part because we haven't been able to diagnose or unify the diagnostic of a problem. The business sector and their technicians have a reduction diagnostic of a problem. The issue of flooding is the result of climate change and the lack of infrastructure or proper infrastructure. On the other hand, the assemblies of the communities or some of the sectors of the academia understand that floods are the result of a multiplicity of factors that is also conditioned to the development model that in our country is characterized with the destruction of the nature and our common assets, and also the improper policies to develop the land use plans. And it is clear that the technique itself cannot resolve the tension existing between these two sectors, these two different approaches. I brought some of the examples that I wanted to share with you of improper policies for the regulation of land use. The city of Buenos Aires has changed the physiognomy of its neighborhoods due to the pressure. Official data reveals that the green surface average per inhabitant in the city is 6 square meters, when the World Health Organization recommends minimum values between 10 and 15. In the last decade, only in the south of my city, the city of Buenos Aires, in the neighborhood 8, we lost 150 hectares of absorbent land that were destined to real estate. Argentina is one of the 10 countries that deforested in the last 25 years. This is published in the different reports of the United Nations. 8 million of hectares that were deforested, and 90% of this deforestation in the north of our country. Tucumán, a town in the north of our country, flooded in 2015, 2017. If we look at the deforestation maps, we see that they overlap with the flooding maps. If we come now to the basin of the Luján River in the last decade, this basin flooded in 2012, 2014, 2015, 2017. In parallel, they got refilled and they occupied the wetlands. The surface occupied by these buildings in the wetlands of this basin surpassed 9,000 hectares. Still today, Argentina does not have a law for protection of wetlands. If we add that it's been a century channeling the natural flows, annihilating the river systems and killing the rivers, and we also have the institutional weaknesses of our basin committee. This weakness is evidenced in the sub-execution of budgets, in the absence of genuine citizen participation, and in the impossibility to articulate policies with the different jurisdictions that are part of the intergovernment basins. This is how we demonstrate the failure in our country to solve this problem. Thank you very much, Maria. Omar, please. Well, I think that... Well, I don't think that the problem is about failures, but things come when they have to come. And I want by saying that the problem or part of a vision we had in relation to risk for many years, we lasted for many years flooding rivers with the fast industrial and agricultural growth, and we found at the end that we should have respected the space of the rivers. But we must understand that initially the management that we did was focused on the hydraulic use. It is not free that postgraduate in Latin America are called hydraulic resources, because we thought about intervening the rivers to use them to take advantage of them for energy, for irrigation, and so on. But risk management started as an engineering thing. It was just reduced to the field of civil engineering, basically. We had to control the strength of the rivers with a dike or embankment, any civil work, so that it didn't affect our vanity in terms of having cities just built over the rivers. By the end of the 90s, that's when we have a real awareness to risk management, in the integrated vision of risk management. But it turns out that when this comes, we don't have the people, we don't have the proper institutions, we don't have the infrastructure of knowledge and information necessary in order to act. So, as the events started to happen with regards to climate change, and when they started to hit, they also forced us to think. And what Japan did in 200 years, we want to do it in 10 or 5 years. So the bad news is that that is not the way it works. It's not just a miracle. Without the installed capacity, without the proper conditions, how are we going to control this type of situations and arrive to this approach of risk reduction in a very fast way? And this is why we are paying for that decision of wanting to take care of the emergency, but with a very low budget, as Mr. Babbitt showed in his presentation. So the good news is that this big hit nature has given us forced institutional articulation. They forced us to strengthen intellectual models, all these anticipation models. The possibility we have today that governments understand that they have to invest in order to mitigate the risk. Time is over, but these are the ideas that I've had, plus one. I'm just going to mention it in these 7 seconds. It didn't exist. It exists today. The integration of a climate, hydrological, and geological services that allow to find integrated visions for risk reduction. Thank you very much, Omar. Mr. Baba, please.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to say something. In addition to my presentation, well, there are so many factors you should develop or improve for the integrated river and flood management in Latin America and the Caribbean particularly. But if I'd say only one most important factor it will be the strong authority. Because in this region, I found that the river or flood is managed by different and separate organizations, okay, and local governments. River is not managed by the single and strong authority at the national level, and this is common in this region, and you should have a strong authority of flood management.
Muchas gracias. Hemos tenido contribuciones.
We have had very relevant ideas of our panelists, very precise, and we want to thank you because you have stick to this very brief, short time, but every word, every idea you have shared is very valuable, and they mean a huge contribution for this diagnostic we have, and it's very structural. It is not just simplistic. We have approached development issues that we have to. We're going to go to the second round of questions under the same dynamics, but now what we want to do is to approach the other side of the equation. We know what the problem is. Now, what are the critical elements that have marked the differences in the countries in the region where we see the good practices in flood management, taking into account the risk reduction of a population? What we want to hear from our panelists is practical recommendations on how to move forward, how we can take care of these problems that have been identified, and that from the different perspectives, what to do to motivate a real change in the agenda for flood management. I want to give the floor to Javier, please. Victor, I'm sorry, Victor.
Yo creo que un aspecto bien importante, lo reflexionado ahorita con la participación de los compañeros, es disponer de información. Sin información es difícil trabajar. Y cuando hablo de disponer de información, hay que definir una estrategia clara y precisa sobre qué tipo de información necesitamos para reducir riesgos y desastres. Quiero aprovechar un poquito el espacio para hablar un poquito de la parte inclusiva de nosotros, las personas con discapacidad. No sé si alguien de los rescatistas que están presentes aquí han tenido alguna experiencia en una emergencia, cómo tratar a una persona con discapacidad en una inundación.
In a flood or a fire, how have you done it? And this is part of the information we need to act.
Y por eso esa señora que se llama inclusión debemos de ponerla en práctica.
Put in practice. We have the rights and we have the same conditions and the same rights as any other person. So I think it's important to specify in the regions in Central America or in the world, but we need to define an executive unit or a structure in which we can base ourselves and have that information for us to work. On the other hand, I mentioned that it was very important, at least in the region that we work, it's important to have a political decision from governments. Why? If we are in the political agenda of a government, we can have more support and improve conditions for coordination of the regions in Central America or at any level required. The other point is to improve participation of the population. It is not just that when the flood is announced or the event is announced, everyone is concerned about, the houses, and then everyone starts running. We have to work, and we have to be very specific, accurate, precise on prevention. If we work on prevention, I assure you that we are going to be able to lower the negative indicators that we have at the moment. I think that with these points, we can, put them on the table and draw a positive result from this event. Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor. I would like to, before I give the floor to Yuri, I would like to tell you that our colleagues from the Risk Management National Unit are going to help us with questions. So you're going to be handed out some forms for you to write your question, specify who you're asking to, so that we try to answer as many questions as we can. Yuri, please. I was commenting with Victor. I have 1 minute left from my previous presentation, plus 1 minute that he's given me. So they accumulate. Now you're negotiating. Very good. Very good for our panelists. Mr. Baba, you spoke about the water agency in Brazil. We have a national water agency that does a federal river management, which are the rivers that trespass the limits or boundaries of a province. Below the national agency, we have the state agencies. These agencies, whose rivers are inside their states or provinces, and some municipal rivers, so they manage the basin. Since 2000, the National Water Agency was created. I have the role to promote the committees of hydrographic basins, as well as to monitor the levels of the rivers. More than 5,000 hydrological meteorological stations under the National Agency of Water. But with this same institution and its role, it was not possible to avoid a disaster in 2011 in the province of Rio de Janeiro. That affected the municipalities of the region in the mountain or in the region of Rio de Janeiro. It was more than 1,000 casualties in one evening, one night. So since 2011, Brazil prioritized a risk management policy that was wider, that involves, regarding flood management. But there are several ministries that have a role in this program, and at the beginning, when this program started in 2012, more or less, with these new institutions such as the National Institute of Disaster Warnings and Alerts, with new legal frameworks and institutional frameworks. Since then, we started with the integration among the ministries. This was reinforced through an example that I'm going to show in a moment, through a cooperation with the government of Japan. Could you please show my presentation? It is a quick presentation that I'm going to share so that you can see the cooperation we had between Brazil and Japan through JICA, where we involved for the articulation of the ministries of the cities, mining and energy, Ministry of Science and Technology. This, apart from these ministries, we had two states, Santa Catarina and Rio de Janeiro, and some other municipalities of these provinces or states. Next, the project had a duration of 4 years, where we trained more than to deal with issues related to disasters. It was in Brazil for 4 years, more than 20 experts that stayed 1 or 2 months to deal with specific problems. We conducted workshops. Could you please go to the next slide? More than 130 meetings, aspects related to the project. Next, please. A set of other events. As a result, we have the improvement of the disaster information gathering or collection, and also the early warning system, the improvement of the assessment and mapping of risks and disasters of mudslides. Also the methodologies or improved methodologies for prevention planning and rehabilitation and reconstruction, especially methodology for the planning of urban expansion considering the risk of mudslide disasters. So we started a unique discussion here among all the players of a program of risk management in Brazil. So for the first time, we brought together 4 ministries to speak for 4 years, and this data was then shared with the municipalities to deal with all these related problems. As I said, or as I mentioned in my first answer, we are working here not for the future or the improvement of all the protocols and the improvement of land and territorial planning, urban planning, how to plan the city considering the conditions or parameters for risk reduction. Same project could be applied for flooding. This was for mudslides, but it can be applied for flooding. We need a huge effort to articulate all these institutions for one single objective, but we need a political decision, as Victor said. And my time is over. I'm open for questions later. Okay, you have a red car. Yuri. Okay, you're done.
Yes, around policies, I'd just like to mention that there are regional frameworks for national policies as well as for local policies. In some countries of the Central American region, there's protocols, letters of understanding, manuals and guides around how to operate. But I believe that we need to do a review of the protocols and bring in new stakeholders that at some point could have been left out from these working guidelines. And I think that everything that has been stated at the table is valuable, but what Victor stated I think is very relevant, which is the matter of information. The members that I represent generate valuable information, but in many cases it is just on the TV channel or in an announcement loaded in the website. I like to urge you, except for the group of IDEAM, I haven't seen any members of the meteorological services, and I apologize because I don't know you, but at least from Central America, I haven't seen them. I'm talking about the actors that generate scientific information about the forecasts. In many cases, the population complains that they don't get there on time, or they're not good, or they stated that it was going to be in an hour and the event took place in half an hour. But I also like to let you know that in terms of the protocols, guidelines, and the country policies, we should have included the institutional strengthening for this group of professionals, because we need better forecasts in terms of the weather and the climate. But this is only achieved with resources in order to train the staff, the different scales of times of the forecasts, and also the necessary resources in order to improve the networks of observation networks and to strengthen those that already exist. Besides that, the communications as well around how to convey the information so that it can be grasped and can be actually used, because from what I have seen is that the product might be great, but the user doesn't understand it, perhaps because of the distance in terms of where to download it, like the website or the TV channel, or the user basically doesn't understand what we meteorologists want to say in our language that is so sophisticated that we usually use, and I include myself. So I believe that yes, this matter of integration of new stakeholders, as well as all of the stakeholders that can contribute with information and with the knowledge and with the policies. I think I have 29 seconds left, so that's perfect. Thank you very much, Bertha. Now, Maria, thank you very much. Let's see here. In light of the absence of proper public policies in order to solve the issue of floodings, the communities got organized. They put together water forums, neighborhood assemblies, environmental organizations as well, and came to the university looking for answers. The question marks that the organizations would bring were: why do we flood? How do we solve the issue of floodings? Is there a technical definitive solution for the issue of floodings? And these meetings allowed for the exchange between the local knowledge, the technical specific knowledge, and other know-hows. And without a doubt, this experience allowed us all to understand the complexity of the issue, and being able to incorporate as part of the technical solution the where, when, with who, and with whom, to be able to reach solutions that improve the quality of life of the communities, and also to put the technical knowledge into context. And the communities put together a set of best practices, and what I wanted to share with you is some of those best practices that, along with the communities throughout many years, we had to develop. The Water Forum of Lomas de Zamora is an organization made up by the locals of the lower basin of Matanza Riachuelo, one of the sites that is most contaminated in the world. This organization for the last 20 years is claiming potable water, sewer, and water works. For the last 10 years, we've been working at the university with the sanitary, water, and environmental issues together. And this joint work allowed us to raise awareness, to create epidemiological maps for the community that we were able to geo-reference eventually, to also question the paradigm of the mega construction works, and to elaborate alternative projects of infrastructure, and to develop an environmental program, which was the program of the social organizations that had the support of thousands of locals, techs, and specialists. Along with the assemblies of flooded neighborhoods, Saavedra, Maquechá, Pacaján, Garín, Luján, and other neighborhoods, we were able to discuss, agree, and elaborate a set of non-structural measures upon which we were able to ask the different legislatures as a bill, Paredes Verdes de Cartagena and others. The Assembly of Flooded Neighbors of Saavedra debated and agreed with all of the community an action plan in order to act before the flooding, during the flooding, and after the flooding. In light of the absence of the official plans, the hydrological and hydraulic model upon which the flooding maps were generated in the river stream Opoy was elaborated by the National Water Institute and the Faculty of Engineering of Buenos Aires University. And to calibrate, we used information that was provided by those people affected. I believe that the communities have to be protagonists at the moment of discussing, developing, and implementing the public policies around floodings. For instance, the risk thresholds that are adopted for the infrastructure construction work should be subject for collective debate. They have to be agreed upon by the communities. The citizenry has to participate at the instance of the debate of the projects, providing local knowledge in the control of the bidding processes in order to be able to guarantee transparency, and in the control of the execution of the works, implementing the citizen ombudsman figure in the Buenos Aires. The Ministry of Infrastructure regulated through Decree 148 the figure of minor citizens of public works. Next week at the Faculty of Engineering, we have the first training course for minors of infrastructure works that is open to the community. I believe that the public university has a key role to perform, generating inclusive spaces for debate where the set of social stakeholders is present and the communities can become protagonists. However, I believe that so that these best practices are translated into outcomes, we must be able to reach an alternative model of development that preserves our common goods, the nature, and that allows us to build nations where nobody's left out. Thank you very much, Maria. Omar? Okay, I believe, well, I'm going to try not to repeat what has already been mentioned by my colleagues here. And I think that one of the things that we take advantage of is that the technology provides the opportunity to have an anticipation capacity. Therefore, an opportunity of focusing on risk reduction and not taking care of the emergency. What does that mean? Well, it means that we need to have an institutional coordination. It means a participation of the universities and research centers. But before it all, it means that the information and the knowledge is considered heritage, nation heritage, and heritage of humanity. That is, we need to strengthen the information systems, but besides strengthening this complex information, I want my father to be able to understand my grandfather, my aunt, and my daughter. They're not engineers, they're not geologists. So we need to have the participation of the artists, social communicators, journalists, and all of the people that have within their trade or profession the possibility of conveying the information that we scientists generate so that the common people can also become part of these matters and understand what is it that's going on, and understand these are not just acts of God, but that we can actually intervene in the territory properly in order to reduce risk. The other matter that I wanted to talk about to finish up is the importance of strengthening the regional capacities. Turns out that knowledge is absolutely central, and it is centered around the main cities. But we need to bring knowledge over there where the floodings takes place and where things actually happen. For the case of Colombia, with the project of UNDP in the Mojana region, which is one of the regions that was mostly affected by the Niña phenomenon, 2010-2011, there was a center that was set up for climate services. That's what it's called, the Center for Climate Services. But the position, it was that it was put in a capital city, in a big city, and I told them, and they accepted my initiative, is that we didn't have to put it in this big city, but there in the Mojana complex, where the people that are there are the ones suffering and that are the ones that have to take care of their own solutions. So I believe that we need to strengthen the region, we need to strengthen the locality, we need to find a way for people to participate on these affairs in order to be able to reestablish the short circuit that we have between science and the know-how, as it's called, quote-unquote, between the region and the nation. That is, we need to break this short circuit and we need to create a proper flow, a solidarian flow, where science can partake effectively, where the information can be constituted into a heritage that is good for all of us, that it's useful. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever that we are monitoring at a very high price with more and more sophisticated devices with absurd spatial resolution, storing millions and millions of data, if we're not capable of making this information useful for society. Thank you very much, Omar. Very well said. I've seen the questions, and our panelists did respond perfectly before. And there's one related to the communication strategies. I have 3 questions. This is what our panel members just stated, the way of how we disseminate information for people to have this information. And I have time for one question. And the question is for Maria. To the extent that what could be proposed, well, this is how it reads. How to accomplish coordination between the municipal development plans or local development plans vis-a-vis the organization of the vulnerable groups or the local groups. How can we manage this with the municipalities in order to accomplish that these human settlements have a different status or can improve this condition? Okay, I'm going to try to answer very quickly here based upon my experience. I am part of different urbanization tables in settlement and popular neighborhoods of the city of Buenos Aires. In the city of Buenos Aires, some neighborhoods have already started their processes of social urban integration, re-urbanization, and it is key to have the dimension of infrastructure. In the city of Buenos Aires, for instance, child mortality in the south is double than in the north. Why? Because in the south we have the greatest amount of settlements where there's no access to potable water, sewer, or river runoffs. And I believe, though, that the way how we can start solving the problematic between the floodings and the precarious settlements or townships is by opening the door to good land use plans, strengthening the regional economies, and yielding priority to the basic infrastructures, river infrastructures, potable water, and sanitation. Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much to all of our panel members. If you allow me 5 seconds to elaborate. I believe that here in Colombia we have a luxury experience, which is what we are undertaking with the JICA project. Those of us that were able to go to Japan to get to see and know the experiences of the integration between scientists, community, we believe that there is a very big opportunity on applying many of the methodologies that are used by the Japanese in order to communicate, but also besides using science in all depth to solve the issues from integrality, bearing in mind something that surprised me in Japan and that I really liked, and it is the history of the events. How do the water systems work, not only from hydraulics and hydrology, but all of it together? I mean, the Japanese bring all of this historical data through paintings, through pictures, that allows them to move forward more and more and not doing things that were already done in the past and haven't solved anything. That was my comment very quickly. Excellent, Omar. Thank you very much. And I believe that with the wealth of ideas that we have here, I would like to try to summarize the relevant points of this session, even though we will prepare a complete summary of all of the ideas that are very valuable. First of all, let's start from the fact that there is structural problems for floodings. And not just the flooding itself, but there's development affairs that have to do with a word that was repeated here many times, the use of the land use plans, human settlements, which are the consequence of a divergence between what happens at the rural level and at the urban level, where basically the rural populations are moving to the cities, and it's a new paradigm that we will have to solve when the cities and the urban development stayed in a different age. And this goes along with the deficiencies of infrastructure. On the other hand, we had governance. We cannot move forward with effective management of the floods if we do not have a proper coordination between institutions, as the one showed by Brazil, the one as shown by JICA in their experience, that has to be fostered. And in this multi-agency coordination, there was a part of community participation, the participation of the people. The participation of the people not only at the end, but at the beginning or the design of the infrastructure works. There's a prior consultation mechanism for the communities for them to be part of the planning processes. So, we also spoke about the matter of the comprehensive management of the basins and preservation of the ecosystems, because that is a structural cause of the floods, the degradation of ecosystems such as wetlands or the highland ecosystem that doesn't allow to the natural basin to respond as it should, and the invasion of the spaces that belong to the ecosystems. One of the main issues that has been identified is also information management. In the integration of ancestral knowledge, the historical memory with the systematic scientific information of the observation systems. The information, as it has been stated by our panelists, is a public good, a heritage that gets and acquires value when people use it, when the community and the citizenry has access. Either this information provides an added value when it's being used for the planning of each citizen. We need to socialize our information systems. We need to democratize our information systems that are working better in the region, but do not connect this last mile for the most unprotected communities in the rural areas and the countryside. So, Victor was mentioning the matter of raising awareness. This is a change of mindset that is necessary so that from the bottom, from the social tissue, we strive to change habits that at this moment are dangerous for development and resilience, because climate change, the extreme conditions, the degradation of ecosystems, and all of this problematic that we have and that has been mentioned by our panelists makes this matter more complex. We really need awareness programs that bring us to changes in collective mindset. And these are the main recommendations that come from this panel, that not are all technological or scientific, which that include and appreciate the monitoring, the forecast capability, and the censoring that is done for floods, yes, but outmost there's social development aspects, the awareness, the participation mechanisms that are inclusive, the environmental programs at the basins, and this development management to bring in the rural level, avoiding excess urbanization processes in the cities that are unleashing a multiplication of the risks. We cannot speak separately resilient cities, abandoning and leaving the agri-industry aside from this perspective. We've also spoken about this regional concept, that to see the whole region, the whole basin, and not breaking it down in the urban spaces from the rural spaces, because that's when we start breaking it down and separating. We need to have intermediate solutions. And also, I'd like to highlight the figure by Dr. Baba, that we continue with a financing scheme, this is for our donors as well that are here, of 87.3% for response and only 12% for risk reduction for disasters. How can we move forward with complying with the Sendai framework where there's such a lack of proportion in the funding for prevention and risk management? These are figures that just show that in cooperation and in the international world, we also need to have changes, because if not, we'll just continue putting out fires and responding to emergencies. On behalf of our panelists and to you, many thanks for your contributions, and thank you very much to all of you for your participation in this session. Have a great afternoon.
Medidas efectivas de seguridad para evitar la construcción de viviendas en las riberas de los ríos es una de las conclusiones presentadas hoy aquí en Cartagena. La prevención es el único camino para evitar víctimas cuando se presentan las tragedias naturales. La invitación para esta noche, 9:30 en punto, para que nos sigan a través de Canal Institucional con lo más destacado de esta primera jornada desde Cartagena. Hasta entonces.